We are at the two dots on DAF Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph. The last part of the Mishnah, in our discussion of a man who, a Yavam who jumps the gun, doesn't wait the way he should for the waiting period to see if this Yevama is pregnant with child or not. He goes ahead and he does Yibum with her, and then 7 months later she has a baby. And the Mishnah says, we don't know who's the father. We don't know whether Ruvain, her original husband, is the father, or whether Shimon, the Yavam, is the father. So in that situation, the Mishnah says that Shimon is obligated to divorce her because now it's a Safek Erva. It's a Safek whether she's an Eishes Ish or not. But the child, no matter how you look at it, we say, Mimanav Shach, the child is a kosher child. Either he's Ruvain's legitimate child, or he's Shimon's legitimate child from the mitzvah of Yibum. There's no question of bastardy on that particular child. So that's what the Mishnah had told us. So Amar le Rav Rav Nachman lema helach achar rov nashim v'rov nashim l'sisha yalda. So the first question that we have is, why do you have this doubt as to who the father is? If Shimon goes ahead and does Yibum 2 months after his brother died, and so we're not sure whether this baby is a full-term 9-month baby from Reuven or whether it's a 7th-month baby from Shimon, let's use the principle of Rov, that you go according to the majority case. Majority of cases, women carry a full 9 months. They come full term. So therefore, why don't we naturally assign this baby as being Reuven's father? So Amar Lei, so Rav Nachman responded to Rav and he said, Nashi didan l'shiva yaldin. He says, our women give birth at 7 months. So Amar Lei, Nashi ditchu havaruba da alma, question mark. He says, so since when are your wives the majority of the world? In other words, that's just your experience in your localized area. That doesn't mean anything. So Amar Lei hachi kaminas. He says, you didn't understand. I was answering you in code. What I really mean to say is like this: Rov nashim yaldan latisha. He says it's true. Most women carry full term 9 months. A minority give birth after 7 months. V'chol hayoledes latisha ubra nikar lishlish yameha. He says, but we have another majority that says that the majority of women who carry full term are visibly pregnant by 3 months. Now, if a woman is visibly pregnant at 3 months and Shimon did Yibum after 2 months, so after a few weeks he would know that this is the wrong woman, that he wasn't supposed to do Yibum with her, because this woman is pregnant from his brother. And yet he didn't detect this. Actually, we don't even know, even when she gives birth, we don't know whether she was pregnant for 9 months or pregnant for 7 months. So that indicates that she's not part of a majority at all. He says, V'zu hol v'lo hukar ubra l'shlish yameha isra le'ruba. And this woman, because she was not visibly pregnant at the first trimester, at the end of the first trimester, therefore we cannot say that she goes according to the majority of carrying full term. So the Gemara now says, "Ikol hayoledes latisha ubernikar l'shlish yameha hamidlo hukar l'shlish yameha ubravadei bar shiva lebasrahu." So the Gemara says, now wait a minute. According to your statement, Rav Nachman, if we're going to take you at face value, you said any woman who carries for 9 months, the baby's visible at 3 months. Well, if this woman was not visible at 3 months, then we can surely say that 3 months after, let's say, her husband died, then for sure we can say that the father is Shimon, the Yavam, because she was not visible after 3 months after she would have, if she was pregnant for 9 months. So the Gemara says no. Ela ema rov hayoledes latisha ubra nikar lishlish yameha v'haimidlo hukar lishlish yameha Israel ruba. So the conclusion of the Gemara is, what I mean to say is really this: most women who carry full term are visibly pregnant at 3 months. Most women, not all. But you have 2 robes that are contrasting each other. They're conflicting. One robe says that most women carry a full term 9 months. But another robe says that when women carry 9 months, the majority of them are visibly pregnant at 3 months. This woman has 2 robes in conflict. So therefore we basically put her back on being a Safek. And that's why we're not sure whether the father is Reuven or Shimon. Tana Rabbanan. Rishon Roy Leos Kohen Gadol V'Sheni Mamzer Misafek. So now we have an interesting brisa. It's almost like an ironic brisa, because the brisa is commenting on what would happen if after Shimon does this premature Yibum, and then she gives birth to a baby after 7 months, What would happen if, instead of Shimon listening to the law of the Mishnah and divorcing her, he stays married to her, and then he has another child from her? Now, the first child, we said, no matter how you look at it, is a legitimate child. It's either Reuven's son, or it's Shimon's son from Yibum. But the second child, since we're not sure whether there was a mitzvah of Yibum here or not, the second child is a Safek Mamzer. We don't know whether this child is a Mamzer or not. If there was Yibum, so that he's not a Mamzer. If there's no Yibum, because the first child is Reuven's son, so then the second child is a Mamzer. So therefore, the first child is worthy of being a Kohen Gadol. He's capable of being the highest pedigree, the highest yichus of Klal Yisrael to be a Kohen Gadol. And the second child is a Safek Mamzer. That's the irony. Yes, Mr. Gruda?
No, the Safek is not Safek, it's Shimon's child.
It's definitely Shimon's child.
Yeah.
We know that, but the question is it a mamzer or not?
Shouldn't have married.
Because if he's married to a sister-in-law where there's no mitzvah of yibum, that's kid's a mamzer.
Why can't you make that argument on the first child?
Because no matter how you look at it, the child's legitimate. It's either Reuven's baby, in which case there was no incest, or there's a mitzvah of yibum. Those are the only two possibilities. So there's no mamzerus there by the first child.
Right, but if it turns out it's Reuven's,
got it? Okay, work it through. Work it through, guys. If you got to get this part straight because we're going to get more complicated. Okay, so get this part straight. The first child, no matter how you look at it, is legitimate. The second child is a Safek Mamzer. So that's the opinion of the Chachamim. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer ein mamzer misafik, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says there's no such thing as a Safek mamzer. Now, what is that supposed to mean? So Gemara asks, "My comer, what is he saying? What do you mean there's no such thing as a Safek mamzer?" Amar Abaye hachi ka'amar. What he means is as follows: Rishon roy lios kohen gadol, v'sheni Safek mamzer va'aser b'mamzeres. So he explains, look, there's a machlokus in the Bryce as follows. According to the Tanakama, the fact that the second child is a Safek Mamzer, the Tanakama holds that because you're a Safek, you're either a legitimate child or a Mamzer, you can't marry anybody. You can't marry a non-Mamzer woman because maybe you're a Mamzer. But you can't marry a Mamzeres, a female Mamzer, because maybe you're legitimate. And the Torah prohibits a legitimate person from marrying a Mamzeres. So you're stuck. That's what the Tanakama holds. Comes along Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and he says, "Oimer eino Safek Mamzer elavare Mamzer umuter b'mamzeres." That he says, no. Even though you're a Safek Mamzer, you're assigned the status of a Vadai Mamzer. Anytime there's a question of your lineage, you immediately default to a Mamzer, and therefore you're permitted to marry a Mamzeres. That's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's argument. And Rava Amar Hachikam, Rava says, I hold just the opposite. Rishon roy lios kohen gadol v'sheni mamzer vadai misafek u'muter b'mamzeres. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov omer ein vadai mamzer misafek ela safek mamzer va'aser b'mamzeres. Rava agrees with Abaye that that's the machlokes between the Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, but he switches the opinions. He says the Tanakama, the Chachamim hold that by virtue of the fact that you're a Safek Mamzer, it makes you halachically like a Vadai Mamzer and you're allowed to marry a Mamzeres. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says the opposite, that no, you're a Safek and therefore you can't marry anyone. Okay? Now, the question is, what's the machlokas of Ayin Rava? Why do they switch the opinions? V'kamiflagi b'de Rabbi Elazar. Their machlokas is in the halacha of Rabbi Elazar the Tana. Okay? The Tanan, Rabbi Elazar omer, vada'an b'vada'an muter, vada'an b'sfeikan usfeikan b'vada'an usfeikan b'sfeikan aser. So Rabbi Elazar says as follows. If you know a person is vadai, illegitimate, he's allowed to marry another illegitimate person that's for sure illegitimate. But if one's for sure illegitimate and the other person's a Safek, or if both of them are a Safek, then they're not allowed to marry. Because even if both of them are a Safek, maybe one's taka legitimate and the other one's illegitimate. So therefore, in that situation, a Safek cannot marry a Vadai. So that's Rabbi Lazar's halacha. The Eluhain Sfeik, and now what's it considered as a Safek? Shtuki, Va'asufi, V'kusi. Now Shtuki, the word, what does Shtuki mean? It means quiet. What happens is, a little boy calls out, "Daddy!" and his mother says, "Shh, quiet." In other words, I don't want you to know I don't want people to have you identify that that's your father. Now, what that means is that this child...
In the closet.
What?
He hasn't come out of the closet yet.
He hasn't... Well, we don't know. That's right. The mother doesn't want the kid to know who his father is. Doesn't want people to know who the father is. So therefore, that's a person of questionable lineage. We don't know who the father is. A Sufi is a person who's found at the doorstep. Also, we don't know what his status is. And a Kusi, the Kusim are, at least at one point in Jewish history, had the status of Jews, but they still have a question of Safek Mamzer, because since they didn't hold of the laws of Kiddushin and Gittin the way that they're given down in Torah Shabbal Peh, they would marry people improperly, they would divorce people improperly, and then there would be second marriages where there would be a question of Mamzeris, because they weren't marrying and divorcing correctly. V'amar of Yehuda Amar Rav. So these are all cases of suffix. So these people can't marry each other, and they can't marry mamzerim either. And V'amar of Yehuda Amar Rav, halacha karebi Elazar. So Rav Yehuda cites his first Rebbe Rav as saying that the halacha is like Rebbe Elazar, that a suffix can't marry a vadai. So ki amrisa kamei dishmul amar li Hillel shana asar yuchsin alumi bavel. So when I said, Rabbi Yehuda now says that when I cited this halacha, that we paskin like Rebbe Elazar, and I said it in front of my other Rebbe Shmuel, he said to me, how can you say that? We know that there's a Mishnah in Kiddushin that says, that was taught by Hillel, who tells us there were 10 different kinds of pedigrees that made Aliyah from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. And the 10 were Kohani, Levi, v'Yisraeli, Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraels, Chaloli, which are children who are born from Kohanim who are married to forbidden women, like a Kohen marries a Gerusha, Geri, converts, Charure, freed slaves, Mamzerim, Nesini are I think they translated as Samaritans or Givonim. These were people who deceived Yehoshua, and therefore Yehoshua accepted them as converts, but because of their deception, he appointed them, many of them, as being his slaves, and therefore they have a question of whether they're Avadim or not. Shtuki va'asufi, so there's what we've said before. All of these are the 10 different kinds of yuchsin. V'kulan mutarim lavo zebazeh. And all of them are allowed to marry all of them. Now, the Gemara in Kiddushin clarifies that Hillel was not suggesting that a Yisrael can marry a mamzer, right? That's not what he's saying. What you have to do is you break down the 10 in 3 different categories, like the way Rashi says. The first group are Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim. They're all allowed to marry each other. The second group are Leviim, Yisraelim, Chalolim, Gerim, and Shichrurei Avadim. Right? Those are converts and Leviim and Yisraelim. Those are all allowed to marry. That's the second group. They're all allowed to marry each other. The third group are Gerim, freed slaves, Mamzerim, Nesinim, Shtukim, and Asufim. Those are all allowed to marry each other. Because even though a Mamzer is not allowed to marry a natural-born Jew, a Mamzer is allowed to marry a Ger. And by the way, that's one of the ways that a Mamzer can purify his future family line, right? So that's the way you break it down. But the bottom line is that Hillel said that a Safek Mamzer, like a Shtuki or an Asufi, is allowed to marry a full-blown Mamzer. So what do you see from here? You see from here, says Shmuel, Vat Amar Talacha Karebi Elazar. How then can you say that the halacha is like Rebbe Elazar, that a suffix not allowed to marry a vadai, if Hillel paskin just the opposite, that a suffix is allowed to marry a vadai? So therefore, we have this machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. So Abaya Savrla Kishmuel, Damar Halacha Kihilel, Umukila Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov, Aliba de Hilchasa, Kihechi de lo Tikshi Hilchasa Hilchasa. So therefore, the machlokes is between Abaya and Rava as to what the Tanakama holds and what Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov holds in our Braisa is very simple. Abaya paskins like Shmuel, that we do allow a suffix to marry a vadai, and therefore, in order to make Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov consistent with the halacha, he says that Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov is the one who says that a suffix is allowed to marry a vadai. Okay? Now, why do we want to make sure that it goes like Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov? Because the Gemara says that Mishnas Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov kav v'naki. That anytime you find Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov in a Mishnah or a Braisa, you automatically know that the halacha is like him because he's clean. He was very, very careful and meticulous in his Piskei halacha. And therefore, we want to make sure that he's in accord with halacha. Rava, however, Savrla Karav Domer Halacha Karebi Elazar, Umukila la Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov aliba de hilchasa ki heichi de lo tikshi hilchasa a hilchasa. And Rava holds just the opposite. Rava holds that according to that the halacha is according to Rav, who says that a suffix is not allowed to marry a vadai, and therefore, in order for Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov to be in accord with that halacha, he switches the opinions around, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is the one who holds that a suffix is not allowed to marry a vadai. Now, Omar Abaye, let's go back to Abaye, who says that a suffix is allowed to marry a vadai. Mino aminola dechol sveikal Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov kevadai mashvili. How can I prove to you that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov agrees with that? Detanya, because look at the following brisa. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer harei sheba al nashim harbe ve'en yodeya al eze mehen ba. That if a man goes wild, he has an orgy, and he has relations with a number of different women, and he doesn't know which ones he's impregnated. V'chein he shabo aleha nashim harbe ve'ena yodas me'ezim en kibla. Or a woman also goes nuts, and she has multiple partners, and she doesn't know who's the father of her unborn child. Nimsa av noseyas bito va'ach noseyas achoso v'nismale kol olam kulo mamzerin. It's going to turn out that because you don't know, it's like the most confusing day in this neighborhood will be Father's Day, right? Because you don't know, it's an old joke. So you don't, so you don't know who the fathers are, and therefore you're going to end up people who are related to each other are going to commit incest because they don't even know that they're brother or sister or father and daughter. And therefore the whole world will be filled with mamzerim. Now notice Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov calls them mamzerim even though they're only suffix mamzerim. So that's the proof that Abaye has that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov considers a suffix mamzer into a vadai mamzer. And the Brisa continues, he says, Valzen nemar umala aharetz zima. And about that, the Pasuk says that the world will be filled with zima, with licentiousness, with promiscuity. So that's his proof. V'Rava amar lacha hachi ka'amar zu mahi. Rava disagrees. Rava says that, and it's not that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is saying that the world will be filled with vadai mamzerim, because that's the very reason why he cited a pasuk umala aharetz zima. The word zima implies a suffix, because what does the word zima stand for? It's a contraction of three words. Zu mahi. What is this person? We don't know. And therefore, that very fact that he says that the word zima is what's going to happen as a result of this promiscuity is the fact that he holds that there's still a suffix. Now, yes, sir. Now we go continue the brisa. This is a fascinating brisa. Yes, sir. Al kain Omer Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Lo yisa adam isha b'medina zu v'yelech v'yisa isha b'medina acheres shemizdavgu ze lo ze v'nimsa ach noseyas achosa. A person is not allowed to marry a wife in one town or one state and then go to another state and marry a different woman because maybe they'll both have children and they'll never know that they were married to the same man. One day they'll meet each other and make a shidduch for their children, and it turn out a brother will marry a sister. So remember that song by Ricky Nelson, I'm a Traveling Man, right? Where he's got a woman at every port, right, at every city. He says that's not a Jewish behavior. You're not allowed to do that, right? So the Gemara says, Eini, is this really so? The Rav ki ikla l'dardashir machriz v'amar man havi liyoma. The Rav Nachman ki ikla l'shach netziv machriz v'amar man havi liyoma. But we know that. Look at these two great rabbinic personages, right? One was Rav and one was Rav Nachman. When they came to a foreign city, they said, "Who would like to be my wife for the day?" Now they needed escorts, but they wanted to do it in a permissible fashion. They were lonely in a strange city, and rabbis need companionship too, and so they would say, "Who would like to be my wife for the day? My other wife is home, and I'm all alone." So that was what they did. So the question the Gemara is asking is, how could these rabbis do that if the halacha is you're not allowed to have two wives in two different cities? The Gemara answers, "Shiny rabbanan depakiu shmayu," that the rabbis are different because they're celebrities, and because of their celebrity status, a woman will know who her husband is, and therefore that when two women meet from two different cities, they'll know that their husband was Rav Nachman or Rav. And therefore you don't have to worry about this problem of incest. Frek the Gemara, the Ha'amar Ravas, but still it's a problem. How could these men, these rabbis, do this? Go to a city and all of a sudden announce who wants to be my wife for the day. The Ha'amar Rav, Tiva'ua linase v'nispaisa tzricha leishev shevinikim. That Rava had said that you can't get married on the spot. You can't just decide, oh, let's just run to City Hall or to Vegas and get married today. There's at least a 7-day waiting period once you decide to marry a woman, because there's something called dam chimud, that a woman may begin to menstruate unnaturally out of result of her excitement of getting married. So you have to wait 7 days, and she has to count shivanikim, 7 clean days, before you're allowed to get married. So if Rav Nachman just showed up one day in the city, he couldn't say, who wants to be my wife for the day? They'd have to wait 7 days anyway. So the Gemara answers, Rabbanan shluchayihu habu mishadri umodoi lahu. So one answer is that the rabbis would send a shliach 7 days in advance to the city and said, Rav Nachman's on his way, who would like to be his wife for the day? Right? Very, very strange Gemara, wouldn't you say? Right? Please don't tell this to my wife, okay? But so the Gemara now says, so the Gemara now says, V'i boyasema. And this is really the real answer, because in the final analysis, and I think you have to learn the Gemara this way, that the Gemara really understands that these great holy people would not just take a wife, a consort for the day, and then just discard her. So the Gemara's conclusion is, that really it's not that they would take this woman as to be their full-fledged wife, but they would say, who would like to be my wife for the day, just to be my escort, but no contact, right? You'll be my escort. Because you can't compare someone who's got bread in his basket to someone who doesn't have bread in his basket. What we mean by this is that great holy rabbis have great Yetzer Haras. The bigger the holy person, the greater his Yetzer Hara. And therefore, in order to suppress the Yetzer Hara, the rabbi would say, I want someone to be my escort. The very fact that I know that I can have her as my wife will prevent me from succumbing to my Yetzer Hara. And that was the reason why they did it. Not that they would chas v'shalom have any physical intimacy with a woman that they just met, but the very fact that they could, and that's why she didn't have to wait 7 days, because she knew she wasn't going to be his wife. Tosfos also points out, he says, even according to the first reason, if a man would take a wife and then she would become pregnant, of course he wouldn't just leave her there, he would bring her home and make her his full-fledged wife. So therefore, even according to the first reason, you wouldn't have to worry about incest problems, because he would bring the woman home. So Tana Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov said, but I have to tell you, after learning all of this, still a very troublesome Gemara, a troublesome brisa. But in any event, it's tzarachian. It needs to be. We learned this before also. Tana Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, Lo Yisa Adam Ishto V'daitu Lagarsha. Another thing that Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov said, having to do with marriage and incestuousness, he says that you should never get married with the knowledge that you're going to divorce this woman. Unfortunately, we see this happening a lot, where a man or a woman says after the fact, I knew I was going to divorce him as soon as he walked down the chuppah, right? You ever hear that? I've heard this. What?
I've heard of starter marriages.
Starter marriages?
You hear about starter house? Starter marriages.
Yeah. Really? But the Gemara says that's usher. You're not allowed to marry a person with the knowledge that eventually you're going to divorce this person. Mishum shenamar, because the pasuk in Mishlei says, Al tacharosh al reach hara'a v'hu yoshev levetach itach. Don't be silent and pretend that there's nothing wrong when you know that there's something wrong and your friend thinks that everything's okay. That's an avla. That's an isser. You have to, if you're going to go enter into a marriage, it has to be with full commitment. If you know you're going to divorce the woman, then you can't be intimate with her, because she's of a totally different mind.
Rabbi, quick question. Back when two mamzer married, what are their children's status?
Mamzer. Even if one mamzer marries a non-mamzer, the child is still a mamzer. Okay, and that's ad infinitum. The only way to dissolve that is, according to some poskim, is if you marry a ger.
Is it 10 generations?
No. That's for Egyptians. No, that's not Egyptians. That's Egyptians is 3 generations. But a mamzer is ad sof kol, ad sof ha'olam. An Eved Meshuchra, right? A freed slave, because as a din of a ger. Okay, let's go. Okay, now let's learn about laws of inheritance. This is a little bit more complicated. Safek v'yavam shabo lachlok b'nichsei meisana. Okay, Safik Amar Ana Bar Mesana Hu V'Nichsi Didihu V'Yavam Amar At Beroidi Diat V'Leslach V'Lomidi B'Nichsi. So now that we've talked about this case of where we have this kid we'll call him Safik. That's his name. His name is Safik. Right? We don't know. Are you Ruvain's son or are you Shimon's son? Okay. Now Shimon, we also know, is the inheritor. Once he does Yibum, he's the inheritor of Ruvain's estate. So he's got this kid, we'll call him Safik, and the kid says, you didn't do Yibum, I'm Ruvain's son, you didn't do Yibum, and therefore Ruvain's estate, my dad, belongs to me. Shimon says, nothing doing, kid. I'm your father, I did Yibum, I get Ruvain's estate, and you get nothing until I die. So the question is, what do you do? So, Havimam and Amutal B'Safik, Amam and Amutal B'Safik, Cholk, and the Gemara says Pashut. It's an equal suffix. We don't know who's right and who's wrong. And anytime you have Maman Amutal B'Safik, money that is on the table that we don't know who it belongs to, and no one is a greater muchzak, no one has greater sign of ownership than the other, you just split it and they go 50-50. Next case. Here a little bit more complex. Safek Uvnei Yavam, Shabo Ulachlok B'Nichsei Meisana. Now let's talk about the next case. You've got Safek, and now you've got Shimon's kids. Now Shimon has passed away. So not only Reuven passed away, but now Shimon the Yavam, or the Safek Yavam, has also passed away. Shimon's kids, Shimon has kids from his first wife, and he's got this Safek kid, and now it's time for them to divide the estate. Safek Omar, Hahu Gavra Bar Mesanahu, V'Nichsi Didihu. So the Safek kid says, your dad is not my dad. He did not do Yibum. I'm the sole heir of Reuven's estate, and therefore the whole estate of Reuven is mine. And B'nei Yavam Amri, At Achinu At, Uminasahu Di'islach Bahadan. And the kids of Shimon say, no, what are you talking about? Shimon, our father, did Yibum. You're his son, just like we are. You're our brother. And therefore Shimon took possession of all of Reuven's estate, and now it all falls to all of us. You get a portion, just like we get a portion. You don't get it all, you get a chelik of it. So Savar Rabbanan Kamei de Rav Misharshi Elam.
Who would get Pishnayim?
That's the Bechor would claim I get Pishnayim.
Safek.
No, the Safek's not the Bechor. He's not the Bechor. The brothers are saying that you're not the Bechor. We are from we're from a previous marriage, and therefore, I mean, it depends chronologically how it would work out. It's possible that the Safek is the Bechor, but it's also possible that he has older brothers from Shimon. In any event, Savar Rabbanan Kamei de Rav Misharshi Yelamei Mar Masnisani. So the question is, what do you do in that situation? So we know that it's a little bit more complex. The rabbis wanted to argue that this is exactly analogous to a Mishnah, but just in the reverse. Now we're going to see this Mishnah much later. It's on DAF Kuf in Yevamos. It says as follows: Ditnan hu eno yoresh osam vehim yorshin oso. There's a case over there, not talking about Yibum, but it's a following case. A woman gets widowed or divorced, and a man comes along and jumps the gun and marries her without waiting the requisite 3-month period. They have a child after 7 months, and we don't know now whether the child is from her first husband, the child is from her second husband. Now, both the first husband has kids with this woman, and the second husband has kids from this woman. So the suffix is as follows. Both the first husband dies and the second husband dies, and now you've got this kid in the middle, and he doesn't know who his father is. So the brother, all of the kids from the first father say, you're not our brother, you don't get a portion from our estate. And the kids from the second father say, you're not our brother, you don't get a portion of the estate. And therefore he's stuck, because he can't go. Each one will deflect him and say, bring proof that you're our brother and you'll get a portion. But until then, we don't have to speak to you. But
the mother still doesn't say anything.
Doesn't matter. The mother doesn't know. How is she supposed to know? She doesn't know. And then, if that Safek kid dies, both of them share equally in his inheritance if he doesn't leave over any kids. So he gets the short shrift in both directions. His estate gets given up to the two sides, misafek, but he can't claim to either side that he's an inheritor. So now let's just reverse that and say that the Safek kid has the advantage. Instead of having the disadvantage in the case of the Mishnah over there, he has the advantage over here because he can claim Mimonaf Shach, I'm entitled. He says, because Hasam Amri Lei, I see Raya Ushkol. There, the two sets of kids say to the Safek, bring a proof and we'll let you take a portion. But Hacha Amr Lahu, I Suraya Ushkolu. But here the guy can say to them, bring proof that your father did Yibum, and then you can take a portion in Reuven's estate. But until then, I'm going to assume that I'm the sole son of Reuven, and I get everything. So because there's an assumption that he has the advantage. That's what the original thinking was. But Amr Lahu Rav Misharshi Amidami. Rav Misharshi says it's not a good application, not a good analogy, because Hasam inhu vadai v'ihu safek, hacha idi v'idi safek. He says that's not a good case. He says because in the case on DAF Kuf, the inhu vadai, the two sets of kids know for sure that they are the children of either the first father or the second father. He doesn't know what he is, and that's why he's at the disadvantage over them. They are vadais. But over here, both the Safek kid is a vadai, and Shimon's is a Safek, and Shimon's kids are Safek. This Safek kid doesn't know who his father is, so he can't claim, I know for sure that I'm Reuven's son. And they also can't claim that we know for sure that our father Shimon did Yibum. So in this case, they're both Safek, so you have nothing to argue. And that's why Rashi says that really in that case, the halacha will be as follows. We know for sure that the Safek kid is entitled to an equal portion of Reuven's estate, okay, together with all of the other children of Shimon. So that you for sure give him. Let's say there are Shimon left over 3 kids, plus we have this Safek. So divide the estate in 4 equal portions, give him 1 portion out of the 4, and then for the other remaining 3 portions, divide it 50-50. The 3 kids get half of that, and he'll get the other half. So he'll end up getting for sure more than the other kids, but he won't be able to claim full rights to the estate. But rather, ela idamya lamasnisin lahadamya. But rather, if you're going to make an analogy to the Mishnah on Daf Kuf, the analogy is to the following case. L'safek uvnei yavam shabo lachlok b'nichsei yavam gufei. Not where they're arguing over Reuven's estate. Let's say they're arguing over Shimon's estate. Let's say, for example, Shimon, who's the Safek Yavam, was a much wealthier person than his deceased brother Reuven. Now, okay, so we've dealt with Reuven's estate, but now Shimon dies. Now we got to deal with Shimon's estate. Now, there, Shimon's children from his other wife are vadai. There they know for sure that we're Shimon's kids, so we're for sure entitled. Da'asim amrilei, I see raya, da'achonaat, ushkol. And therefore they say to the Safek kid, they say, we don't know whose kid you are. Bring us proof that you're Shimon's son, and we'll share in Shimon's estate with you. But until you can do that, you're not entitled to anything from Shimon's estate. Okay, let's go to the next case. Safek uvnei yavam shabo lachlok b'nichsei yavam lebasar depalag yavam b'nichsei meisana. Let's go to the next case, next level of complexity. We said before that if there's a dispute because we don't know whether Shimon did Yibum or not, so the Safek kid says, I'm Reuven's son, so I get all of Reuven's estate. Shimon said, no, you're my son and you get nothing. So what did we say in that case? They split it 50-50, right? So Safek gets 50% of Reuven's estate, Shimon gets 50% of Reuven's estate. Good so far? Mm-hmm. Now, what after they did that, then Shimon dies. So Shimon has 50% of Reuven's estate in his estate. And now the question is, can Safek kid come along now and make a secondary claim on the remaining half? So that's the question. B'nei Yavam Amri Aisi Raya Da'achona Atushkol. And so the children of the Yavam, Shimon's other kids, say, bring proof that you're Shimon's son, and we'll let you have a chelik in that 50% of Reuven's original estate. And Amr Lahu Safek Manav Shaychu. I achuchon ana havuli manasa bahadaichu, the ibar mesana ana havuli palga de plala gavuchon bahadoi. And the Safek kid says, what are you talking about? No matter how you look at it, I'm entitled to something of that remaining half of Reuven's estate that was Shimon's when he died. Because either I'm Reuven's son, in which case Shimon had no rights to it at all, and I get the whole thing, or I'm Shimon's son, in which case Shimon did the mitzvah of Yibum, and he was entitled to that half, and in which case, give me a chelek, give me an equal portion as your brother. Now, what we're not taking into account is that if Shimon did do Yibum, then Reuven wasn't entitled to his half that he took at that time. But we'll ignore that for a second, okay? Just follow along the logic in the Gemara. So the question is, after Reuven has taken his first half, when Shimon was still alive, and now Shimon dies, the question is, can Reuven do double jeopardy? Can he reopen the case based on the fact that he has a new disputant? Now his disputant is not Shimon, but it's the heirs of Shimon, and now this is a whole totally different lawsuit. And I'm not taking Shimon to court, I'm taking Shimon's kids to court, and therefore I can reopen the case. So Rabbi Abba Amar Rav Kam Dina, Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar Hadar Dina. Rabbi Abba says, what's done is done. You can't reopen the case, because we look at it as it's just a continuation of the previous case with Shimon, and what that was already paskined. So you're out of Reuven's. You no longer have any dibs on Reuven's estate. No, but Rabbi Yirmiyah says no. You can reopen the case because these are new disputants, and you can reopen it with a new set of litigants.
Is he fighting just the 50% left of Reuven's, or is he also fighting the whole of Shimon's?
Shimon's estate, we discussed already, whether or not he's entitled to a chelek of Shimon's estate. So the brothers can say to him, bring us proof that you're Shimon's son, and we'll give you a chelek. So there he is stuck. He can't, unless he brings proof, he can't bring. But Reuven's estate, he says, I'm entitled to. The other half of Reuven's estate that Shimon got, and now Shimon died, he says he's entitled to it no matter what. So lema beplugta da admon v'rabbanon kamifilgi. Let us suggest that the same machlokas between Rabbi Abba and Rabbi Yirmiyah is the same machlokas as the following two tanoim. Disnan. Mi shahalach lemedinas hayam va'avdelo derech sadeu. A guy, very interesting case. A guy owns a piece of property that's surrounded on all sides by another property. The only way that I can access my property is by walking through the other guy's property. So obviously I have rights of passage. That's something that you acquire. And there was a pathway that I always had. I don't know, is that an easement? Is that what they call it? Yeah. So I have an easement on the other guy's property to be able to access my property. The problem is that I go and take a long cruise for a year, and by the time I get back, the pathway is overgrown, and now we don't know where my path is. So what are you supposed to do? So Admon Amar Yelech Bikitzara. So Admon says, very simple, just choose the shortest way to get from the outside to your property, and you can walk that area. The Chachamim Omrim Yikach Lo Derech B'mei Amana O Yifrach Ba'avir. The Chachamim say no. You either have to purchase a new easement from the owner on the outside, or you can fly. Right? Those are your two choices. But you can't just take it for free. So the Gemara now says, there's always humor in the Chazal. V'havinan bala rabbanan shapir ka'amar admon. And so the question that we ask the Chachamim is, what's wrong with Admon's argument? We know for sure the guy used to have an easement, so just give it back to him and take the shortest path. So v'amar of Yehuda Marav hacha b'mayaskin kigon shekifua arba b'nei adam me'arba ruchas. So we're talking about it's not where there's one landowner who's surrounding the middle guy. There are 4 landowners and 4 different directions that are surrounding the middle guy. And each one is saying, you didn't have an easement with me, you had it with some other guy, with the other guy. And therefore he's stuck, and that's why he's got to purchase it again. So ihachi my time at the Admon. So then what's Admon's argument to say that you can just choose the shortest path? V'amar Rava be'arba da'asu mikoach arba v'arba da'asu mikoach chad kuli amalo pligi damatzi madchile. Rava says you're right. Admon would agree with the Chachamim. if there were 4 owners when the guy left on his trip, and there are 4 owners when he comes back, or even if there was only 1 owner when he left on his trip, and there are 4 guys who come back when he comes back, so we don't know who's the owner that owes him the easement, then Admon would agree that you got to buy an easement now anew. But kipligi b'chad da'asi mikach arba'a. We're talking about a case as follows. When I left on my trip, I was surrounded by 4 different landowners. Some rich guy came along and he purchased all the surrounding properties, and now it's all owned by 1 person. So therefore the machlokas is as follows. Admon saver matzi amarle mikol makom darkecha gabachu. So Admon says, listen, I know that one of the guys that you bought the property from had given me an easement, so therefore you own the easement that I'm entitled. In other words, you have to give me the easement that you purchased. And v'rabanan savri da'amar lei ishaskas shaskas v'ilo mahadrana shtar lemarayu v'lamotzis lishta'u yedina bahadayu. And the Chachamim say, no, you know what, the guy, he's going to be an Oiber Chacham, he's going to say like this, listen, you either meet my price for an easement purchase, or I'll just give the title back to the 4 guys that I purchased the property from, and then you'll be stuck all over again because you won't be able to go to any of them. So you better play nice with me, otherwise you're going to really be up a creek. Okay, so now the Gemara says, Leima Rabbi Abba da'amar kirabanan, v'Rabbi Yirmiyah da'amar ka'admon. So the Gemara says like this, the very fact that the Chachamim say that you can say, look, I'm coming, even though I'm the sole landowner, and you're right, the easement is on is somewhere on my property, but since I'm coming based on the previous ownership of 4 people, I have the koach of 4 separate owners, and since if you were dealing with 4 separate owners, you wouldn't be able to make a claim against any one of them, I'm coming with that power as well. The other one says, no, you're a new owner, and so therefore it's a whole new ball game. So the Gemara wants to say it's the same thing over here. You have this machlokes. Can you deal with the heirs of Shimon as if you're dealing with Shimon or not? If you say that the heirs of Shimon are going back to the same status of Shimon's claim, so then Reuven has no case. That case with Shimon was decided, and therefore if the heirs are coming mikoach Shimon as a continuation of Shimon, then there's no case against his heirs either. But if you say that no, it's totally different, it's a new owner, and therefore you're entitled to open up a new case, so then it's the same machlokas between Admon and the Chachamim. So Amar Lacha Rabbi Abba, no, Ana da Amri afilu ka'admon. So Rabbi Abba will tell you, you know what, it's not a good comparison. Because I who say that you can't reopen the case, I could hold like Admon, who says that you look at it as if it's a new owner, and he can't come from the previous case, because Ad kan lo kamer Admon hasam ela mishum da'amar le mimonavshach darki chad gabachu. The whole reason why Admon says that the guy is entitled to his easement back is because he can say to the new owner, he says, I know somewhere the easement that I had is on your property, so therefore you have to give it to me. But aval hacha mi'ika lameimar hachi, but over here you can't say that. He says, because over here, ha lo yada mai katava minayu. Here, the Safek guy doesn't know what his real claim is. He's saying, maybe I'm Reuven's sole son, and maybe I'm Shimon's son. But based on the possibility that I'm Reuven's son, you have to give me everything, or you have to give me something. But it's not like he's making a vadai claim. Right? He's not like he's making a for sure claim that I'm entitled to something. And Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar Lacha, Ana da Amri Afilu L'Rabbanan. And Rabbi Yirmiyah, who says that you're allowed to reopen the case, right? That's what Rabbi Yirmiyah says. Hadar Dina. He says he could tell you. I say hold even like the Chachamim over here, who say that so reopening the case means that you're looking at it as a totally different disputant. Even though over here, the Rabbanan say you're coming mikoach the 4 guys, and therefore you can come with a strong claim. But I could hold even like the Chachamim over here, because ad kan lo kami Rabbanan hasam ela mishum darmalei ishaska shaskas v'lo mahadrana shtar lemarayu v'lamatzis lishto yedina ba'adayu. The whole reason why the Chachamim say that the nitva, that the person on the outside has such a strong power is he says, look, I could always give title back to the 4 guys that I bought the property from, and then you'll really be up a creek. But aval hacham yi'ikal meimar hachi. But over here, you don't have that claim. Here, the reason why Reuven is entitled to reopen the case is because the heirs of Shimon can't say, we'll restore everything back to Shimon. Our Shimon is dead. And therefore, they can't say, well, if you don't listen to us and fly and take a walk, we're going to revert things back to the way they were. They can't revert things back to the way they were, and therefore they don't have the same powerful claim as in the case of the landowners. We'll hold it here for today.